Homeowners who found themselves in the shadow of neighbours' hedges were lobbying the Parliament today to draw attention to the deadline for consultation on a new law. The members of Scothedge say they are the victims of unreasonably intrusive hedges. Pam McDougall is their spokesperson.
We have over 300 members, and a lot of people telephone us who don't want to become members because their neighbours might find out that they're Scothedge members, and perhaps they're malicious neighbours. So there's an awful lot of people out there with high hedge problems.
And it's all down to relationships with neighbours, isn't it, principally?
Well, if you had a relationship with your neighbour, obviously there wouldn't be a problem. But some people don't want a relationship and they don't want to talk about it, unfortunately. They think it's the hedge is on their ground, which it is, and they don't really care, some people. I mean, we've tried just about everything to resolve our problem, and unfortunately it will need legislation.
So what is the proposed legislation, and what are you as an organisation, or how are you as an organisation hoping to change it?
Well, of course, the legislation is already in place in England and Wales, so we do have a sort of template for that, and it's working very, very well there. It's having a preventative effect, in fact, and we're hoping that we'll work with the Scottish Government to issue guidelines, first of all, and if those guidelines are not complied with, then we want the local authorities to be able to investigate and ensure that that neighbours do keep their hedges at a reasonable height.
You mentioned MSPs there. Presumably you were meeting some of them today. What sort of feedback did you get from them?
We've had some very good feedback. I mean, John Park was there, and we even had Robin Harper, the Green MSP, who's been very supportive, actually. We have cross-party support from MSPs, which we're very, very pleased about. And I'm just really sorry, and so are they, that it's taken just about a decade to get as far as we have.
And what about these guidelines and indeed the legislation in England? What does it, just in summary, what does it mean for people who are caught in this sort of loop where one person says, I've got a reasonable hedge, and the other person says it's far too high?
Well, the local authority then has to assess, given the guidelines, whether this is a reasonable hedge or not. If it's not a reasonable hedge, and if there's light and sunlight being robbed, really, from our homes and gardens, then a letter is sent informing them of this and instructed to reduce the size of the hedge.
But people have gone to great lengths, haven't they, in the past to ignore court orders even, and sometimes some people have taken it into their own hands and cut down a neighbour's hedge, and they end up in all sorts of legal wrangles, don't they? Well,
they certainly do, and that's the reason why I was, right from the beginning, a decade ago, determined that I would be part of something that would do it legally and peacefully and well. And that it would have a good outcome. I don't like confrontations with neighbours. I'm sure very few people do. And unfortunately, it has to take legislation to enforce these neighbours to keep their hedges at a reasonable height.
And what is a reasonable height?
That's a very good question. One of the things we've tried to avoid is to actually define what a hedge is, because every situation is different. It depends whether your house is a bungalow or a house, or whether it's on a slope, how far or how near it is to your house or your greenhouse or your garage. So, it's important that we get the guidelines right.
Pam McDougall of Scothedge, do tell us what you think. Perhaps you have a very high hedge, or your neighbour does. Do get in touch with us. Try to keep any defamation out of it.
Bring your disputes on here.
Yes, 80295, 80295, or newsdrive at bbc.co.uk.
Now, we do have a couple of your